Thank you for joining us and watching this presentation from the Los Angeles Housing Department. This webinar will provide an overview of the Rent Stabilization Ordinance and the current renter protections in the City of Los Angeles. The information provided on this webinar is only for residential properties located within the City of Los Angeles. This webinar does not provide information for commercial units or properties located outside the boundaries of the City of LA. This webinar is only intended for rental properties located within the City of LA. If you do not live in the City of LA, please contact the Los Angeles County Consumer and Business Affairs at 833-223-7368. 833-223-7368 for information related to tenant landlord housing information, as the information of the city and the county differ. An easy way to determine if your rental property is within the city boundaries is the LAPD response to police requests, or you may pay your water and/or electric bill to the Department of Water and Power. The city's rent stabilization ordinance, also known as the RSO, are rental units that are 1, located within the City of Los Angeles, and 2, have a permit and/or certificate of occupancy issued by the Department of Building and Safety on or before October 1st, 1978. Some properties that were built after July 16, 2007 may also be subject to the city's RSO if the original property was subject to the RSO and then demolished and replaced with newer residential property. The RSO stabilizes rents by allowing annual rent increases and provides just cause evictions, which means tenants must receive a reason to terminate their tenancy. The payment of relocation assistance to tenants is required if a landlord evicts a tenant for no fault of their own, such as for landlord to occupy the unit, move in a resident manager, or demolish and/or remove the property from the rental housing market, also known as the Ellis Act. The city has approximately 640,000 rental units subject to the RSO, which is about 118,000 properties. To determine if you live within the City of Los Angeles and to find out if you own or live in a unit subject to the RSO, you can visit ZEMA's website at zemas.lacity.org. Enter your rental property address, and under the tab Housing, it will say yes or no if the property is subject to the RSO. Another quick option is to text RSO using your phone to 855-880-7368. 855-880-7368 and follow the prompts. Data charges may apply for text messages. The City of Los Angeles declaration of local emergency, effective on March 4, 2020, ended on February 1st, 2023. These rules apply for all residential units of the City of Los Angeles. Beginning February 1st, 2023, tenants must pay their full current monthly rent in order to avoid eviction for non-payment of rent. Low-income tenants with income at or below 80% of the AMI impacted by COVID-19 continue to have protections through March 31st, 2023. Tenants must have notified their landlord within 7 days of the rent due date. Tenants eligible for this provision have until February and/or March 2024 to repay their unpaid rent. A tenant cannot be evicted for non-payment of rent if they did the following. They provided their landlord with a California COVID-19 related declaration of financial distress form within 15 days of their rent being due for rent from March 2020 through August 31st, 2020. This law was also extended if a tenant provided their landlord with a state COVID-19 related declaration of financial distress form within 15 days of their rent being due and paid 25% of their rent for rent due from September 1st, 2020 through September 30th, 2021. This was an extra state protection for tenants. Tenants still owe the rent, and if a landlord needs to retrieve the rent from the tenant, they must go to small claims court and retrieve the rent as consumer debt from the tenant. Tenants who are not covered under the state's declaration of financial distress process described as I just described, have city protections for unpaid COVID-19 rental debt and must pay their debt as follows in order to avoid eviction. Rent owed from March 1st, 2020 to September 30th, 2021, tenants must pay by August 1st, 2023. Rent owed from October 1st, 2021 to January 31st, 2023, tenants must pay this rent by February 1st of 2024. Unauthorized pets and occupants related to COVID-19. Until January 31st, 2024, landlords cannot evict a residential tenant based on the presence of unauthorized occupants or pets necessitated by COVID-19. Prior to evicting a residential tenant based on the presence of unauthorized occupants or pets, the landlord must serve the tenant a 30-day notice to cure. This notice cannot be effective before January 31st, 2024. No-fault evictions were prohibited from March 4th, 2020 through January 31st, 2023. Landlords who evict tenants for no fault must submit a declaration of intent to evict with LHD for no-fault reasons, such as to comply with a government order, owner, family, manager occupancy, demolish, or with removing the property from the rental housing market. Annual rent increases for rental units subject to the city's RSO are prohibited until February 1st, 2024. Interest and late fees on unpaid rent are prohibited for renters financially impacted by COVID-19 for rental debt from March 1st, 2020 through January 31st, 2023. Retroactive late fees are prohibited for all COVID-19 rental debt. Rent increases under Assembly Bill 1482, the Tenants Protection Act, which became effective on January 1st, 2020, applies to most rental properties built from 1978 through 2008. Here you will see the maximum annual rent increase allowed under AB 1482. They are annual rent increases that are limited to no more than 5% plus the percentage change in the cost of living for the region in which the property is located, or 10%, whichever is lower. All residential units not subject to the RSO are now protected under the city's Just Cause Eviction Ordinance, effective January 27, 2023. This applies after the tenant's expiration of their initial lease or after 6 months of continuous occupancy, whichever comes first. Similar to the RSO, a landlord must have a legal reason to evict a tenant. The legal reasons for eviction under the Just Cause Ordinance are as follows. At-fault tenant evictions are non-payment of rent, lease violation, causing a nuisance, using the unit as an illegal purpose, such as drugs and gangs, failing to renew a similar lease that may have the same terms and or duration as the initial lease, denying a landlord access into the rental unit after receiving proper written notice in advance, a subtenant not approved, a failure to comply with a tenant habitability plan. This only applies to RSO units, not units subject to the Just Cause Ordinance. No fault tenant evictions under the Just Cause Ordinance is eviction for owner, family, manager occupancy, demolition or withdrawal of the rental unit from the housing market. However, substantial renovation does not apply to RSO units, only the Just Cause Ordinance. To comply with a government order, to convert to affordable housing, conversion of a residential hotel, and a HUD-owned property to be sold. Landlords must pay relocation assistance to tenants for all no-fault evictions. Relocation assistance depends on the composition of the household as seen on the chart. A qualified tenant is any tenant who on the date of service of the written notice of termination is 62 years of age or older, handicapped or disabled, or who has one or more minor dependent children. A tenant that is not considered a qualified tenant is an eligible tenant and is entitled to receive a relocation assistance amount that depends on the length of time in the unit and income. A low-income tenant is a tenant whose household income is 80% or less of the AMI. Mom and pop relocation assistance applies only for evictions for landlord family occupancy or resident manager occupancy. A mom and pop landlord owns 4 or fewer rental units and a single family home on a separate lot in the city of LA. Evictions from rented single family homes owned by natural persons requires a lower relocation payment of 1 month's rent for a single family home subject to the Just Cause Ordinance, and the owner is a natural person. Includes properties in a trust, or the property is a registered legal entity controlled by that natural person who owns 4 or fewer rental units and a single family home on a separate lot in the city of LA. Landlords are required to submit a declaration of intent to evict with LHD for all no-fault evictions for rental units subject to the Just Cause Ordinance and the Rent Stabilization Ordinance. Landlords can deduct a tenant's unpaid rental debt from relocation assistance. Effective January 27, 2023, any written notice terminating a tenancy for a tenant must be filed with the Los Angeles Housing Department within 3 business days of service on the tenant per the Los Angeles Municipal Code. Eviction notices can be filed and uploaded at housing.lacity.org/eviction-notices. All notices to terminate based on non-payment of rent must include the number of bedrooms on the notice. Again, all no-fault evictions must be filed with LHD, submit required fees, and pay the tenant relocation assistance before a notice to terminate a tenancy is issued to the tenants. Landlords of residential properties are to provide a summary of renters' rights, protections notice, for tenancies that commenced or were renewed on or after January 27, 2023. This notice must also be posted in an accessible common area of the property. You may find a copy of the protections notice at housing.lacity.org/protections notice. This notice has been updated as of July 1st, 2023. The city's tenant anti-harassment ordinance became effective on August 6, 2021, which prohibits landlords from harassing tenants. This slide has examples of tenant harassment. It is important for tenants to keep records by taking notes of each harassing event. Tenants should keep a log with dates and times and get statements from neighbors and take pictures. If a tenant feels they are in physical danger, they should call 911. Otherwise, tenants can file complaints with LHD to report harassment. Effective March 27, 2023, tenants who receive a rent increase of more than 10% within 12 months and are unable to afford the rent increase have the option to receive relocation assistance to move out of their rental unit instead. The relocation amount is based on the bedroom size of the rental unit. Relocation assistance for tenants who rent a single-family home is 1 month's rent if the landlord is a natural person who owns no more than 4 residential units and a single-family home on a separate lot in the city of Los Angeles. A landlord can deduct a tenant's unpaid rental debt from the relocation assistance payment. Effective March 27, 2023, landlords may not evict a tenant who falls behind on rent unless the tenant owes an amount higher than the fair market rent. The fair market rent depends on the bedroom size of the rental unit. For example, if a tenant rents a 1-bedroom unit and the rent is $1,500, the landlord cannot evict the tenant since the rent owed is less than the fair market rent for a 1-bedroom unit. Again, non-payment of rent notices must state the number of bedrooms in the tenant's rental unit. If you have any questions that was not addressed during this presentation, you can reach us at our hotline at 866-557-7368, Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., excluding holidays, or you can send us an email inquiry anytime at housing.lacity.org/ask-housing. All renter protections discussed in this webinar can be found online on the COVID-19 Renter Protections page. Please continue to check LHD's webpage for updated information. We appreciate you taking the time to learn about the city's RSO and current renter protections. Again, our general hotline number is 866-557-7368. To RSVP for any of our workshops or webinars, you may call us at 213-928-9075 or sign up for our electronic newsletter. Thank you.